afternoon and thanks for joining us for this sitting of Parliament. I am Simone Absalom. The session will start with prayers, followed by a roll call of those in attendance. This is usually followed by statements by ministers, questions and answers to questions, items on the government business, and private members' motions. In today's session, we will be continuing the nation's annual budget debate. Now, for your information, the annual budget debate provides us with the opportunity to take stock of our performance over the previous fiscal year and to measure our progress in relation to the targets previously set and to assess the effectiveness of our management of the country's finances. Prime Minister Andrew Holness is set to give his contribution to the budget debate today. Last week, opposition spokesperson on finance, Dr. Peter Phillips, urged the Holness administration to withdraw the $13 billion tax package it announced in Parliament, calling it too burdensome and advising the government to, quote, wheel and come again. At the same time, Dr. Phillips dismissed the overall budget as offering no hope. Finance Minister Audley Shaw announced the $30 billion package, noting that the measure was necessary to help bridge a $29 billion gap in the $715 billion national budget. The tax package includes tobacco and alcohol, 20% increase in motor vehicle licenses, increase in fuel tax, GCT of 16.5% on group health insurance, and a reduction of a threshold for application of GCT on residential electricity. In the following sitting, Mrs. Portia Simpson Miller delivered her final address to the nation's legislature as opposition leader in Parliament. As she read the last words, lawmakers, some of whom have been around since her 1976 election to the chamber, started beating the decks before rising to their feet to applaud the outgoing leader.
Jamaica and our people have a special place in the deep recesses of my heart. It is a pleasure to serve this nation. May God bless you. God bless Jamaica. Land we love. Love you all.
If you are planning to attend the session at Gordon House, here are some rules you need to keep in mind. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without first obtaining an admission card from the office of the clerk. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. No photography, videography or sketching of the proceedings is allowed, unless so authorized by the presiding officer. And there should be no smoking inside the parliamentary building. Now over to the proceedings.
Dr. Wheatley, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Malahoo Ford, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Spencer, Mrs. Williams, Mr. Green, Mr. R. Scott, Mr. Azan, Dr. Bloomfield, Mr. Brown, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Clark, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Ms. Daly, Mr. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Dr. Davies, Mr. Fagan, Dr. Ferguson, Dr. Green, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Hales, Mrs. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kellier, Mr. Main, Dr. McNeil, Ms. Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Michael Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Redmond, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mrs. Simpson Miller, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Terrelong, Reverend Thwaites, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Mr. Wright.
Statements by ministers. Announcements. Before we take the announcement, I wish to recognize a number of diplomats and officials, number of councillors and mayors and former member of parliament and former senators and other officials from government departments, students and friends. I welcome you here today to this sitting of the House of Representatives. We wish that you enjoy what takes place here today, but I wish to advise that in this House you follow the instructions you get when you came in. You do not participate with your hands and your mouth. You participate with your eyes. You have to just look. We do not wish for you to participate in the sittings. You may select to hear, as we do sometimes. However, we wish that you enjoy the day, and we welcome you. And as usual, we wish that you travel back safe from whence you came, and that you visit us again. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: Ministry Paper number 19, and annual reports of the Sugar Company of Jamaica Limited for the years 2009-10 and 2010-11. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Port Authority Management Services Limited for the financial year 2015-2016. Annual report of the Jamaica Information Service for the year 2013-14.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notices of motions given orally.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the motion of the Prime Minister, I beg to give notice that at the next sitting of the House we will move that we will move leave that. I beg to give notice that the next meeting of the House we will move the Representation of the People's Act, the Political Parties Regulation 2017 Resolution, whereas Section 104, subsection 1A of the Representation of People Act, the Act, provides that the Electoral Commission of Jamaica may make regulations subject to affirmation resolution for the purpose of giving effect to the provision of Part 5B of the Act, and in particular, but without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing. Such regulations may contain provision in relation to A, the conduct and operation of political parties, B, prescribing the form of application for registration of a political party, C, the form and manner in which records of donation shall be kept by political parties, D, keeping of records of state funding by political parties, and E, the manner and form of submitting annual financial reports and statements. And whereas the Electoral Commission of Jamaica on the 7th day of March 2017 made the Political Parties Registration Regulation 2017. And whereas it is desirable that the Political Parties Registration Regulations 2017 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Political Parties Registration Regulation 2017, and 2, the Political Parties Registration Regulation 2017, which were laid on the table of the House on the 9th day of March 2017, are hereby affirmed. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House I'll move. Whereas subsection 1, subsection G, subsection 1 of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honourable House of Representatives to vacate his seat if any firm in which he is a partner or any company of which he is a director or manager becomes a party to any contract with the government of Jamaica for any or on account of the public service, or if he becomes a partner in a firm or a director or manager of a company who is a party to any such contract. And whereas the Member of Parliament for St. Mary Western is a director at Sun City Mining Company Limited, a company which operates a sand mining and washing operation in Clarendon, and may from time to time enter into contracts with the government of Jamaica and its agency. And whereas the member has disclosed his interest in this company, be it resolved that this motion be referred to the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration report. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at the later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing order to enable me to take the last mentioned motion.
Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the House. Motion for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing order to enable me to take the motion, a notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor?
Mr. Speaker, with a bit of respect, the matter that the House Leader has raised is a most important matter. We have been waiting on it for some time, and I certainly would like to participate. It's not the rules for the political parties. Oh, okay.
The question is for the House of the suspension of a standing order to enable the motion which was given earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, it's a motion for exemption for the member from Western St. Mary. Do I read it again for you? Well, I'll read it because of the members interfered across there. That you can learn something new. Whereas subsection 1, section 1, subsection G, subsection 1 of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honourable House of Representatives to vacate his seat if any firm in which he is a partner or any company of which he is a director or manager becomes a party to any contract with the government of Jamaica for any or an account of the public service, or if it becomes a partner in a firm or director or manager of a company who is a party to any such contract. And whereas a member of Parliament for St. Mary Western is the director of Sang City Mining Company Limited, a company which operates a sand mining and wash operation in Clarendon, and may from time to time enter in a contract with the government of Jamaica and its agency. And whereas the member has disclosed his interest in this company, be it resolved that this motion be referred to the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Those in favor?
Mr. Minister, your motion for the agreement is put. Those in favor? Agreement of the motion? Those in favor? Those against? As of it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that the notice of which I gave earlier be agreed to.
There is a motion on the floor seeking the agreement of the House. There was an agreement? Those opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the recommittal of notices of motion given orally.
Those in favor for the recommittal? Those in favor for the recommittal? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Most Honourable Prime Minister, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, he will move to introduce and have read the first time the following bills shortly entitled 1. The Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Act 2017. 2. The National Identification and Registration Act 2017. 3. The Defence Amendment Act 2017. The other one? Mr. Speaker, the debate continues on the bill shortly entitled the Appropriation Act 2017. And today the Most Honourable Prime Minister will make his contribution to this debate.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when I searched through the members of Parliament to figure out who I would ask to be Speaker, I had two options. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, I made the right choice. Mr. Speaker, on rising, I give praise and honor to the Almighty Father for bringing us here together and for sparing us individually and as a country and as a parliament and as a nation so that we can all gather here again to deliberate on the nation's business. Mr. Speaker, let us not forget that we are here because of the tireless support of numerous persons who continue to offer their time, effort, resources, and, Mr. Speaker, we must not forget to thank them. I especially want to thank all the people who have contributed their time, effort, and resources to work on the various partnership initiatives. Sometimes I see these people repeatedly, but they make the sacrifice for their country. Naming, of course, always creates a challenge, but I want to publicly acknowledge the Social Partnership, the Economic Program Oversight Committee, EPOC, which was established under the previous administration and continued, the Public Sector Transformation Oversight Committee, a new one, PSTOC, the Economic Growth Council, the Electricity Sector Enterprise Team, ESET, which comes to an end or has come to an end, and they have done a very good job. We on this side, Mr. Speaker, were very critical of them initially, and for good reason. But they have completed the task that they were set, and they have done it well, and I wish to publicly thank them, and in particular, the chairman, Dr. Vin Lawrence. I also, Mr. Speaker, want to thank the unions and the various monitoring committees for the work that they have been doing. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the various board members who have volunteered their time and effort without pay at great sacrifice. We value their contribution, and we want to say thanks. I salute the dedicated and hard-working team at the Cabinet Office, led by Ambassador Douglas Saunders, and the OPM and the Mega Ministry, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, that team led by PS Audrey Sewell, who works assiduously in various roles. I want to thank the ministers who work directly with me between OPM and the ministry, Minister Chang, Minister Vaz, and Minister Derek Smith, who I spoke to this morning, who is recovering very nicely. And of course, Minister Edward Warmington. Mr. Speaker, I'm certain that it is equally on this side as it is on that side, that the new members in the House are discovering how difficult representational politics is. And the great sacrifices that we have to make in representing the people. I want to say to them, both on this side and on that side, don't give up. Don't give up. It is, to me, it is the greatest service that man can give to man. Public service. I want to thank my extended family of West Central St. Andrew. I'm proud, very proud to be their representative. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I am representing the constituency now for 20 years. Mr. Speaker, I've carried my family to Parliament, literally. And I must acknowledge my dear wife, who is now serving her constituency remarkably well. And my sons, Adam and Matthew, who are at school today. Mr. Speaker, politics is a thankless job and sometimes a heartless job. I want to, on behalf of the Parliament and the people of Jamaica, say thanks to the Most Honourable Portia Simpson Miller for years of dedication and commitment to serving the people of Jamaica. At an appropriate time and with your consent, Parliament will arrange a sitting in your honour. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's budget presentation sets the priorities and gives the details of plans and the actions to achieve them. It is also an opportunity to showcase, to brag a little about the achievements of the closing fiscal year. And my wife asked me, so are there any goodies in the budget? Are there any goodies? And I recall, Mr. Speaker, listening, when I was growing up, listening to the budget presentations. They always had some goodies, something in there to give the people hope. I'll carry the basket next time. Mr. Speaker, the people have expectations. They have expectations that we will address this ongoing problem of taxation. And a lot of people are angry about taxation. Just before coming here, Mr. Speaker, I got about 3 or 4 emails as running through them because people actually take the time to calculate and work out. And, were I not a politician, I probably would view taxation and fiscal measures in the way that it is generally viewed. A large part of that, Mr. Speaker, has to do with how we as politicians debate the issues. Sometimes when the roles are reversed, the positions are reversed. And what it has done, and I'm sure that the leader of the opposition who will be stepping out of the political fold will add her voice. But what it does is that it brings an asymmetry, meaning 2 different perspectives to the problem. So you can't really tell what is the truth. So people take positions sometimes merely on emotions. And it's a real problem. So what I have to do as Prime Minister is, yes, there is politics to be played, but I think where we are now is that we really have to focus on what is the truth. What is the true situation? Mr. Speaker, a large part of the problem has to do with just the very low social trust in our country, just very low. So it's very hard for governments to act because every action is viewed with such great suspicion. And one of the things that I think we should join in trying to achieve is building public trust. Because the truth is that the same problem that the former Minister of Finance faced when he was at the wicket is the same problem that the current Minister of Finance faces. The problems are not different. The solutions and the applications might be a little bit different and might give differing results. But the truth is, and I think we can't separate on that there are some truths which we will have to come to grips with as a country. So, Mr. Speaker, our reality, Mr. Speaker, is that after 40 years, and I hate to repeat this, but this is the reality, there has been really not much growth. Much of the development that we have had has essentially been financed by debt. A large part of our debt is as a result of poor management of public accounts and fiscal profligacy, meaning that we have not made the right expenditure priorities. We have allowed corruption sometimes to get into our revenues and make bad decisions. Mr. Speaker, poorly run public enterprises resulting in losses and the financial sector meltdown of the 1990s have all contributed to our debt. And the truth is that a lot of the public sector entities that were making losses, the government had to take on their debt. A lot of private debt had to become public debt during the FinSAC era, and that has contributed to our debt. As a result, we now owe more than we produce in any one year. That's the state of the country. Whatever we produce in any one year, the debt is larger than it. We are now paying, basically, for the mistakes of the past, which limit our options for the future. A significant portion of the revenues we raise go towards paying debt. Jamaica knows, and I'm forming the opinion, that deep down, most Jamaicans know that we cannot spend more than the revenues we raise after we have paid our debt. That's the reality. That's the reality. Whatever is available for the government to spend is far less than our needs, far less than we can spend, that we really should be spending on our roads, on our water, health, education in any one year. There are no benefactors for Jamaica or big brothers. And I want to say that. Jamaica is an independent country. There is no big brother out there that is going to help us. We have no more benefactors. And as an independent country, we have to stand up on our own 2 feet. There is no printing press for money. Those days are gone, over. Those days of hyperinflation that hit Jamaica in the 90s and early 2000s, those days are gone. We cannot go back to those days. We can't print money to spend our way out. That's not an option for us. Mr. Speaker, there are no secret funds hidden away somewhere. Sovereign funds, we don't have that. Other countries have a heritage fund or a sovereign fund where in difficult times they can rely on. We don't have that. So, Mr. Speaker, as an independent country, we must be disciplined in the management of our fiscal affairs. Must be. So we cannot finance our development by borrowing. The only way to bridge the gap between what we are able to spend and what we really need to spend to bring prosperity to the people is to better manage the tax revenues we raise. And I want to stress this point. Whatever we raise in taxes, the government must be frugal in its management. And you need to do this, Mr. Speaker, by implementing public sector reform, by divesting agencies that are making losses or could be better run in the private sector. And we need to find ways to increase the utilization of assets that we have. You know how many warehouses, how many buildings we have that we're just paying security to watch, just paying residual costs to maintain, but they're not producing anything. So these are strategies which the government is employing. Mr. Speaker, we have to plug the leaking revenues. That is, the revenues that we should collect, but don't collect. And we do this by putting in place anti-corruption measures, tax reform, one important thing. And, you know, the tax reform that shifts from direct to indirect is one such strategy. And later on I'll explain. But the other thing that we have to do if we're going to spend what we really need to spend to bring prosperity, the one that has eluded us, and I know that the former Minister of Finance, former Prime Minister, tried, and that is to bring growth to the country. Yeah, we wouldn't say that there were never attempts. I mean, but what I'm saying is the issue is the record of success. And what we are trying over here is tweaking, doing things differently. We are employing a different growth strategy, which is not relying on a Keynesian model, that is the ability of government to spend to create growth, but rather on a model that relies heavily on empowering the private sector to release the innate energy industry within the private sector. Well, you see, the question is, who is more effective at doing that? And who will get the better results and who has the better track record? I think an examination of the record will show that. But as I said, today is not the day to play the politics. So the growth strategy. I have something for you. I have something for you.
A summons.
The growth strategy, Mr. Speaker, means that we are going to develop new industries. We are going to diversify the economy. But a large part of the growth strategy, which we really need to pay attention to, is that we have to reduce crime and violence. And again, we have to make the public sector less of a cost on the private sector. We say the ease of doing business. And that has been something that we championed when we were the government between 2011. The previous government championed it, and I would say did fairly well in climbing the ladder, and we are now doing the same thing. I think on this regard, if the country can come to a common understanding, there is much progress to be made. Mr. Speaker, this government has been faithfully executing all the strategies to bring us to the point where one day soon we will be able to better address our social and developmental needs from our revenue. And I will elaborate later on this in the presentation, but I want to say a few words on the 1.5 tax plan, which has moved Jamaica in a big way from direct to indirect taxation. As I said last year, Mr. Speaker, an appreciable amount of Jamaica's debt was incurred over successive periods when revenues fell short of projection and the shortfall was made up by borrowing. In other words, one way of looking at our stock of debt is that a significant portion was built up due to the persistent shortfall of revenues as against projections. Revenue sustainability, revenue reliability, revenue certainty are the cornerstone of a credible fiscal policy. And I see the former Minister of Finance looking on, and he would appreciate and understand what I'm saying about setting revenue targets, then making expenditure targets, and then missing those targets, and then creating the need to levy taxes. So, Mr. Speaker, for better or worse, personal income tax has proven to be an unreliable and unjust mechanism with great, what the economists call, horizontal inequities. As few people pay, and those who actually pay don't always pay. So when we say horizontal inequities, what we are really saying, if you and I earn the same income, but somehow you are in the informal sector and I'm in the formal sector, we're earning the same income, but because I'm in the formal system and I'm on the tax roll, I pay income tax. But the person who is in the informal system, they get to take home all their income. They bear no burden. So that is the real inequity of direct taxation. And, you know, it is borne out in the facts. The facts are there are 1.3 million persons employed, Mr. Speaker, but less than 500,000 Jamaicans are on the tax register. That's it. That's the reality. And that is because of Jamaica's large informal sector. There is the reality, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality. Our income tax, including, Mr. Speaker, what people earn outside of the formal system, is not a very fair tax. Jamaica's reality is that the burden is therefore placed on the few trapped in the PAYE system, whilst others escape. The government is focused on developing solutions for our circumstances from the toolkit of what works. The tax system has to be overhauled and reformed to promote greater reliability, equity, and economic efficiency. Indirect taxes collected upfront are inescapable, making them reliable sources of revenue. And because everybody pays, there is what we call, as I said, the horizontal equity. Mr. Speaker, for the same reason, however, when we move to indirect taxes, there can be what is called vertical inequities, meaning that Peter earns more than Paul, but Peter pays less of his income in taxes than Paul. Or even the other way around. But there's the vertical inequity. So, and how we look at this when we look at taxation, Mr. Speaker, persons who are poor spend more of their income on consumption. So they have to pay consumption taxes. Whilst persons who have a larger income, consumption accounts for a smaller proportion of their income. So the way to correct that, Mr. Speaker, is to, first of all, establish a welfare, I don't like to use the word welfare, but establish a social safety net system which uniquely identifies persons who are classified as being in need of support, and then you make, not that many, but it's a significant number. It's a large number, but it's not as, but you make what is called a cash transfer to them, which is what the PATH system does. And if you look at the budgets that we have placed on the table, we have consistently increased year on year the amount of money to PATH because we do not want the vertical inequity. So the reality, and you did that too, for the same reason, right? So the reality of the situation, the truth of the situation is that the government acknowledges, understands that the shift could have an impact on the poor, and therefore we have made, well, it could if you did make preparations, but we have made the necessary measures. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we have increased the PATH program and the school feeding program.
47% increase.
Of course, of course.
7% increase.
So, Mr. Speaker, these are undeniable facts. So it don't make sense we argue over them. So the persons who are classified, registered as being in need of state support, we make sure that we increase the benefits to them. So we have introduced a reform of the tax system, moving away from a less efficient tax, a more inequitable tax, and a less reliable tax, to a more efficient tax, a more equitable tax horizontally, and a more reliable tax, which is the indirect taxation. So what you will see going forward from the fiscal program of the government is a far more stable projection and actual outturn of revenues, which means that the situation that caused us to be borrowing, that we will remove that situation with these kinds of tax reform. So yes, there's all kind of debate, and we have pitched the program as one that is giving back more funds. And yes, it is giving back into the hands of the people. And that is a fact. You can't argue that point. On the 25th of this month, is this month or next month? Which month they get it? April, 25th of April, next month. They're going to get another amount in their pockets. And that leads me, Mr. Speaker. And that leads me, Mr. Speaker, to make one other point. Which has just escaped the debate that I have been listening to about the tax package. Mr. Speaker, this tax package is a revenue neutral tax package. And I'm looking keenly at the face of the former Minister of Finance, the opposition spokesman on finance, keenly at his face, because there is nowhere where he has spoken that he has mentioned that little fact, that the net effect on the revenue of the government is zero. This tax package does not raise additional revenue for the government. The net effect is zero. So I want to know, because it has to be said. No, it does. It has to be said. All right, so you know what? We should really do a study, as you have suggested, on the effect. And I tell you what, Minister of Finance, I think we should do a study on the effect. Do the study, because instead of us arguing politically about it, let's do a study. Yes, right? No. So I want people to appreciate that point, that it is a give back, and that give back is replaced with a fairer, more equitable, more reliable tax, which makes our economy and fiscal arrangements much better off and makes us less susceptible to the build-up of debt. No, it's a slightly different thing from when the government was that side, and they came, Mr. Speaker, and they slapped on a $16 billion tax package, which was not revenue neutral. Then they slapped on a $10 billion tax package, which you didn't get back anything from, and then a $14 billion tax package. Do not ever compare the taxation that you have placed on the people with the taxation that this government has done. Never make that comparison. I want, Mr. Speaker, for you to... Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I happen to hear. Mr. Speaker, I don't normally follow the opposition spokesman on finance, but these days, you know, he's riling up the crowd. And I heard, and I can't, to be fair, I heard that you were saying that the country must resist the tax package. And I'm saying, you know, it must be rum talk. In other countries that would be bordering on almost sedition or treason, anarchism, insightful. Mr. Speaker, it is never easy. It is never easy.
Prime Minister, I'm going to ask you to rest a while the time for speaking has expired. I'm going to ask the Minister to
Mr.
resolution.
Speaker, I ask that the most honourable Prime Minister be granted time sufficient for him to complete his presentation.
The resolution is that time be extended to the Prime Minister for him to finish his presentation. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Easy. It's never easy for any government to put on taxes. Mr. Speaker, and as a member for East Central St. Andrew pointed out, that oftentimes there is this great disconnect when you're putting together the budget. Even within, you know, your own party and in your own cabinet even, there is a disconnect. And that sometimes you have to bring everybody back on the same page, because this thing is one debit, you must have another credit. It must balance. If it doesn't balance, then you have a problem. So it's not easy. And it's not easy to face the public who is upset, and sometimes rightfully so, because in the back of their minds they are thinking, was corruption a cause for the need for taxes? Was the government made bad decision? You know, and I can appreciate and understand all of that. And I'm saying to the public that there comes a time when we have to recognize that we are all in this boat together, and that you have to trust the captain of the boat. And of course, the captain has to listen. The captain has to listen. That is how he will know if the ship is about to sink or there is an iceberg ahead. So this captain is listening, and we hear. And so what leadership has to do in difficult circumstances is always to appeal to the best in people. And we are appealing to the best in the Jamaican people. So we have heard the great concern being raised about public bodies and the de-earmarking of funds. I've heard what the persons in the hotel sector have been saying, and I know my Minister of Tourism has deep sympathies for those positions. You know, You know, and it is not a matter that we take lightly. And I'll share a position with the country. When I was Minister of Education, I fought strenuously for an earmark fund in the National Education Trust because I felt it was necessary. We needed it to build schools. Ministry of Finance said, you know, we have to move away from these segregated earmark funds because they just don't lend themselves to good fiscal arrangements. Well, and I engaged in a big debate about it. Eventually, I relented because the truth is that segregating the public's finance creates a big fiscal problem. In fact, a part of the reason why we have the fiscal problems that we have is because the government does not have control over all its revenues. So we are concerned in this House mainly about the balance in the central government and forget that there is another concentric circle, a bigger one actually, around the government called the public bodies. And they have to be in balance as well. The truth is, and a fundamental principle of public management, that if the quasi-government or the local government or a statutory body fails, its debt becomes sovereign debt. It becomes central government debt. So it is really a false dichotomy to believe that you really have insulated funds. Because if anything were to happen to any agency, they are going to turn to the central government. And so the proper management of the country's fiscal affairs really should be to have a central consolidated fund, as it was originally conceived in our Constitution. But, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has over 200 public bodies as compared to economies several times our size, which have 1/4 of this number. For example, when I looked at Singapore, Singapore had somewhere in the region of about 50 public bodies. And Singapore's GDP is over 300 million. Our GDP is a little less under $20 billion. But we have 200 public bodies. So that's a reality, and you can't debate that. There are currently a number of licenses, taxes, and fees that are collected directly by public bodies or earmarked for them. That is, they are collected by the central government and turned over to them. The total revenues of these public bodies, including taxes and fees, licenses and contributions, were as high as approximately $74 billion in 2015, or approximately 20% of the then central government's tax revenue, with the expenses of those entities in that year being approximately $54 billion. In an ideal world, the best public financial management principles support an efficient allocation of public resources where all the revenues first flow to the consolidated fund, with the central government allocating to each depending on the needs of the day. The advantage of this approach are, firstly, the public bodies are not, by definition, fully included in the macro-fiscal plans and thus cannot present unexpected demands on the budget. In fact, much of Jamaica's debt, tens of billions of Jamaica's debt, arose as a result of several public bodies that found themselves in difficult times. The type of fiscal management that we want, Mr. Speaker, is not to have our resources segregated and locked away. but we need to have the ability to allocate them efficiently. That is, allocate them as we need them. Mr. Speaker, any economics textbook, anyone who studies economics understands it, will recommend the approach. It is the best thing to be able to have certainty and control over the fiscal arrangements of the country. And I think, Mr. Speaker, more and more government policy will have to move in that direction if we are to achieve a strong, predictable, sustainable, reliable source of revenue and good fiscal management practice. Mr. Speaker, I think that we have to make connections. There is a connection between our productivity as a people and our economic growth. There is a connection between our economic choices and our economic growth. There is a connection between the efficiency and the effectiveness of government and economic growth. There is a connection between an overly bureaucratic regulatory environment and the level of job-producing investments that we get. There is a connection between the effective management of our public accounts and fiscal affairs and our economic growth. The important thing is that Jamaicans are now beginning to realize that our future is connected to our present actions and decisions. Given our present situation, we have no option but to grow up and deal with these things maturely. My observation from being in Parliament for 20 years is that we do not look often enough at the big picture and make the connections. We must give Jamaicans the full story and not the partial view of the truth. Mr. Speaker, we are all responsible. Economic growth is about the complexity of the connections in the society. The more integrated the linkages are in the society, in the economy, will be the greater the economic growth. And I know that the Minister of Tourism, the Minister of Agriculture, Investment and Commerce and Fisheries understand this concept, that you have to start, and the former Minister of Industry and Commerce understand the concept, that you have to make connections. And so we are doing that as part of our growth strategy. And we need now, Mr. Speaker, as a society to start to make the connections between the things that we would want, the actions we take, the decisions that we make, and the outcomes that we have been achieving. The connections. So, Mr. Speaker, I just thought that I would clarify some of the issues that have been bandied about in the budget. And to say to the Jamaican people that you have a government that is listening. You have a government that cares. You have a government that understands. And you have a government that is committed to doing the right thing in the interest of the Jamaicans. Before we get to the goodies, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't going to include this section in my speech, but I decided to include it on second thought because I'm worried about the society. I'm worried about what I see as a kind of deterioration in our culture, in the fabric of what it means to be Jamaican. And I don't know if you don't see it that way, but I think as an elected representative, as Prime Minister, I think I'm entitled to share even my private thoughts about what is happening. And you know, I've heard other members of the House make comments with the background of which is a similar concern, that there seems to be this deterioration in our culture, who we are, how we interrelate with each other, how we see ourselves. And what it comes down to, having looked at it and agonized over it, is that somewhere, and I know that the member from Central Kingston will probably agree with me, that somewhere, no, he will understand, somewhere we have lost respect for the right to life. Mr. Speaker, the first duty of government is to protect and preserve and promote life.
Hear, hear.
That's it, the first duty of government.
Hear, hear.
And all other rights follow from the right to life.
Hear, hear.
Our Constitution and the Charter of Rights guarantees the right to life, liberty, security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof except in the execution of a sentence of the court. The Charter makes it clear that the state has an obligation to promote universal respect for the observance of human rights and freedoms. Within the general scheme of our Constitution, therefore, government is not merely a passive observer of fundamental rights and freedoms. Government, its organs and agents, have a duty not to take life or deprive anyone of their freedoms and security to enjoy life. More than that, government has a duty to actively ensure that threats to life are minimized and the rights and freedoms which determine quality of life are expanded. Anything that threatens life and the enabling freedoms and security to enjoy life must get the direct and instrumental attention of government policies and action. Mr. Speaker, in 2014, the top 5 causes of death in Jamaica were cerebrovascular diseases. We call them stroke. Or strokes. Diabetes, we say sugar. And this one is a little bit difficult to pronounce, so help me. It's ischemic. Ischemic. Heart diseases. And then there are the hypertensive diseases, high blood pressure. And then there is one other disease which causes significant numbers of death in Jamaica. It's called violence. Violence. In fact, that is the 5th leading cause of death in Jamaica. So, Mr. Speaker, the 5 categories accounted for approximately 46% of all deaths in Jamaica over 5 years old. The 2014 data shows that of all causes of death, non-communicable diseases accounted for 12,573, or 67% of all deaths in the population 5 years and older. Preliminary data shows that the probability of dying from one of the main non-communicable diseases between the ages of 30 and 70, which is considered to be dying young from these diseases, would be 17.8%. That's the probability. It's fairly high. Cardiovascular diseases accounted for 4 in 10 deaths. Cancer, 2 in 10, while diabetes and chronic respiratory diseases accounted for 1 in 10 deaths. All these diseases are related to our lifestyle. They are prevented or caused by the way we choose to live, eat, play, and work. There are several underlying factors driving non-communicable diseases. The main ones, Peter, smoking. Alcohol abuse, diet, diet. But here is the one that we don't pay a lot of attention to, and we need to: obesity and inactivity. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health will have much to say on the plans of the government to actively promote healthy lifestyle in Jamaica. Nevertheless, I believe it appropriate to point out that the prevalence of inactivity, that is the lack of exercise in the Jamaican population, is too high. Based on the latest data available, over half of our population is overweight. Youth consumption of sweetened, carbonated soft drinks is very high. It is estimated that 3 out of 4 students drink a soda 1 or more times a day. The government is considering a fair approach to discouraging the consumption of sweetened drinks and other products. Mr. Speaker, we as the government that has a duty to not just observe human rights, but to promote it, to promote life. We must lead by example, and I've directed the Minister of Education and the Minister of Health to examine ways in which sugar could be reduced or removed from formulations sponsored and served by the government in public educational institutions. And develop and launch a public education campaign about the effects of overconsumption of sugar. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to, and just as I heard the member from St. Mary say that, technology is moving so fast, new products are being developed. There are really affordable and available alternatives to sugar. I don't want to give any brand, but there is a plant called stevia, which I encourage people to look at. And more physically active, and by physically active, we want to say, Mr. Speaker, 150 minutes, 2.5 hours per week of brisk walking and stretching is a good start. That is what is recommended by the WHO. Cut down on sugary and fatty foods, quit smoking, and moderate alcohol intake. That's what you would do. I leave the minister up. I leave the Minister of Finance to. Mr. Speaker, Jamaicans are being denied their fundamental right to life, freedom, and security to pursue fulfilling lives by a multiplicity of threats. Over the last 15 years, on average, 18,000 deaths have been registered in Jamaica yearly. Many of these deaths, 18,000 deaths, 18,000 average over the last 15 years. No, deaths, 18,000 deaths. Based on 2014 data, loss of life due to transport crashes was the 15th main cause of death. And I want to point that out. Last year, 379 persons were deprived of their lives in road traffic crashes, not accidents, because most, if not all of them, were preventable. But the statistic which we should be concerned about is that 55% of those who perished in road fatalities were between the ages of 15 and 44. This is your most productive years. These are the breadwinners. The government has taken keen interest in ensuring that our public road infrastructure is safe, that our laws governing road usage are up to date and enforced, and we intend to pass the Road Traffic Act in the coming fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, I chair the National Road Safety Council, but of course the real chairman is the Vice Chairman, Dr. Lucien Jones, who is a true advocate for road safety in Jamaica, and I would like to acknowledge his work. Mr. Speaker, we have been examining GIS data, that is hotspot crash data, and we now know clearly where the high probability accident roads are. And I have given some directives to the NWA for them to take steps to put in place safety measures to reduce accidents on these high crash roads. Mr. Speaker, we have given, we have given a policy nod to the use of electronic monitoring, electronic surveillance, and ticketing systems. And the NWA is now testing various systems to see which is the best to deploy. And that, I am certain, Mr. Speaker, will improve enforcement and reduce fatalities on the road. So this is an action that the government is taking in preserving life. Mr. Speaker, the government is, well, before I go to that point, let me implore motorists to reduce speed, obey the rules of the road, drive defensively, and be courteous and considerate to others, and do not drive while under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or cell phones. Mr. Speaker, the government is sensitive and concerned about violence and its negative impact on the right to life and the fundamental freedoms and security of our people. Mr. Speaker, the fifth most prevalent cause of death in Jamaica is assault, defined as the intentional use of violence on the physical person resulting in death. From a public health perspective, violence could be considered a disease, and in Jamaica, it is a disease of epidemic proportions. Mr. Speaker, the epidemiology of violence shows that it is the main cause of death in the age group 15 to 35, accounting for 1/3 of all deaths in that age group. Violence is the second leading cause of death in the age group 35 to 45, accounting for more than 1 in 10 deaths in this age group. Approximately 1/3 of accident and emergency visits are from violent intentional injuries, mainly blunt force trauma, lacerations, and stabbing. Mr. Speaker, the disease of violence is the leading cause of death in our most productive years of life. Mr. Speaker, it represents an incalculable opportunity loss in the productive output of the country and a great burden on our healthcare system. There is significant social cost and personal trauma that impacts families and communities. Mr. Speaker, violence is preventable, and the underlying cause are essentially the way in which we choose to live and relate to each other. Mr. Speaker, in disciplining our children, we use violence and abusive language, teaching them that the way to right a wrong, bring order, or stimulate a positive change in behavior is through the use of violent means. Mr. Speaker, violence features in many intimate relationships. Violence is not a demonstration of love for your partner. The leader of the opposition in our presentation quoted a popular DJ, the warlord Mr. Bounty Killer, and about the taxation. And I found it interesting because aside from his social commentary on taxation, he also made a very important social plea, which is to stop violence against women, to stop domestic abuse. And I think that is an appeal that is worth repeating. Our artists, our DJs, you know, I have no shame in saying this, that they are more popular than us. People hear them and listen to them more. And so we need to get them to be saying the right things to the people. And so I was also very impressed. I thought it was very big of him that he also publicly apologized for his past behavior and put down the hammer. Mr. Speaker, in the resolution of conflict, whether it is domestic or social, or in a work context, the first resort for many Jamaicans is violence. More victims of violence and abuse and bold advocates, and I want to repeat that, more victims of violence and abuse and bold advocates are coming forward and speaking up, refusing to accept violence as normal. Mr. Speaker, those in our society who accept violence as normal will soon find that violence and abuse will soon find that there is a growing resistance to it. Growing resistance. People are now more willing to come out and speak up and challenge the old norms. And so you're going to have a kind of confrontation. The government has to be prepared to deal with this because there is no way that the government can take a stance in support of violence. So this government is not prepared to accept the use of violence in our social transactions, whether it is in disciplining our children, in intimate affairs, in domestic affairs, or in social work affairs as a currency. Mr. Speaker, we have been taking concrete steps to reduce the acceptance and use of violence in the society. First, the government must set the example. The wrongs of the past must be acknowledged and apologies offered to the victims of state-inflicted violence as recommended by constituted review bodies. On behalf of the Jamaican state and in my capacity as Prime Minister, I will make the apologies in Parliament to the victims of the Tivoli Gardens incursion and I also believe it is my duty to apologize to the victims of the Coral Gardens incident. The government will amend the Education Act to explicitly prohibit corporal punishment in schools. Already several of our laws prohibit corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is prohibited in early childhood institutions. Corporal punishment is prohibited in places of safety and children's homes. It is now time. I know, Mr. Speaker, that there may be some resistance to this move. But I invite the former Minister of Education especially to consider the point that I am about to raise. And I invite our teachers as well to consider the point that I am about to raise. During the period of the Education Transformation Program, the government spent hundreds of billions of dollars on a behavior modification and management stream, which was designed as part of transformation to empower teachers with alternative methods of behavior change, behavior modification, classroom management. Such alternative measures which did not include corporal punishment. The government of which I was a part, I was then the Minister of Education, also introduced deans of discipline to assist with the pastoral care of students. And it worked very well. It reduced the level of violence in school, reduced fights, improved discipline, and if you would recall, there was a period of time when there were several killings in schools, and the introduction of those methods and the deans of discipline contributed significantly. In fact, there were a few years where there were no killings in schools. I say this because the intention was never to have the two systems working side by side, that you are using alternative methods which are promoting tolerance, respect for life, respect for the person, the inviolability of the person, and then at the same time, you are applying corporal punishment. I think the modern society that we are striving for must make a decision that public institutions must not use violence as a means of correction, discipline, or righting wrongs. Mr. Speaker, we are reviewing the domestic violence legislation with a view to making acts of domestic violence serious offenses and to offer greater protection and support to victims. We have developed and will shortly implement a zero-tolerance policy as a means of early intervention using existing powers under the law for preventative detention for situations which could amount to domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and sexual abuse. This year, we will launch a national campaign to promote peace building, increase the awareness of the society against violence, and reduce the use of violence in all its forms in our society. When we were on that side, Mr. Speaker, we had advocated strenuously for a joint select committee to review the Sexual Offences Act, the Child Care and Protection Act, the Domestic Violence Act, the Offences Against the Persons Act, and the offences and punishments under these acts. We are pleased to see that the committee has restarted and are committed to this process to ensure that we can, Mr. Speaker, truly become a less violent society. Mr. Speaker, the disease of violence also manifests itself in crime. The ultimate manifestation of violence is the intentional and purposeful taking of another person's life. We say in Jamaica, murder. Mr. Speaker, the central concern for the public is crime and violence. However, it should be clear from what has been said that countries with a crime and violence problem usually have other underlying problems. A 2013 global study on homicides carried out by the United Nations Office on Drug and Crimes pointed out that there are a small group of factors that appear to account for most of the differences between violent and peaceful crimes. The violent countries tend to have similar weaknesses, and the ones that are becoming more peaceful have similar strengths or have implemented similar reforms. Many of the violent countries have weak and corrupt governance, low growth in their economies and weak fiscal management, inefficient or compromised institutions, especially with regard to law enforcement and justice, and low trust and social capital. The countries with falling levels of crime and violence and an increase in peace and social cohesion and prosperity are those that have committed to good governance principles, the supremacy of the rule of law, accountability systems, and stridently tackling corruption. They have undertaken reforms to promote better fiscal management and inclusive economic growth. They have strengthened the law enforcement and justice systems with efficient, integrous, and strong leadership that integrates technology, evidence-based, and rights-based practices in the administration of their duties. They have built social consensus around a plan of action. They have engaged civil society and other stakeholders in the process of social partnership building. They have improved physical infrastructure, and they have, Mr. Speaker, improved social control by formalizing the society through land titling, identification and documentation, electronic surveillance, and CCTV in public spaces, and they have reduced cash transactions. Jamaica has some specific considerations when we begin to examine crime and violence. One is that our location, which we brag about all the time, we say it gives us a natural advantage for logistics. But if you think about it, we are on main shipping routes, but we are also on main trafficking routes. And therefore, much of the crime that we are experiencing in Jamaica is driven primarily because Jamaica is used as a transshipment point, primarily because of our location. So any strategy to deal with crime, you have to figure out how you're going to control your border, control your maritime space. The other problem for Jamaica is our historical, cultural, and social inequity considerations, which underlie crime and violence. So, Mr. Speaker, a strategy or a plan to transform a violent society must simultaneously resolve the weaknesses associated with violence and poverty while developing the strengths associated with peace and prosperity. As it turns out, more police cars, more cameras, more raids, and hard policing may have a short-term effect, but certainly will not have a sustained long-term effect. The plan to tackle crime cannot be successful if it is narrowly focused on the police getting the criminals on the streets. A crime plan is only one element of a greater strategy to address all the elements to bring sustainable peace and security to Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, to tackle crime requires a national effort, engaging all groups, interests, and communities. All hands must be on deck. Whatever we put in place in the name of citizen security and public safety must provide cogent and credible responses to the threats to the rule of law, natural disasters, pandemics, public disorder, social unrest, and malevolent attacks. Mr. Speaker, last year I advised the nation that we were developing the strategic framework to coordinate the myriad plans and activities crafted and executed by various arms of the state. Some of these plans are not new. In fact, when I look at the body of work, it is quite extensive. The Ministry of National Security has very prolific writers who prepare reports and strategies and plans, and there is no need for me to go and create anything new. Because, Mr. Speaker, I know that this point, I know that this point will escape you. But one of the things that we discover in management is that if you do not coordinate, the best laid plans will fail. I come to this job not as first and foremost as a politician. I come to it as a social scientist. Because so I come to this job, Mr. Speaker, not to look at what is there and abandon it. In fact, that has not been the strategy of this government. We are a constructive government, so we must build on what we see. Some of the plans, Mr. Speaker, as I said, were not new. Some are already being implemented, but lack of focus and coordination has prevented them from having effect. Lack of focus and coordination has prevented these plans from having success. Mr. Speaker, we have seen plans for legislative commitment, plans to improve leadership and management of the security forces, plans for funding and resourcing, going back as far as when the now opposition spokesman on finance was then Minister of National Security, plans to build foreign partner support, plans for community intervention, and a host of other initiatives, which, when taken together, Mr. Speaker, they are all there. The elements are all there. But we have to put in the critical element, management and coordination. We have to make everything work together seamlessly. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have developed a plan to secure Jamaica, which is not a plan that excludes what is there, throws away what is there. We build on what is there. We bring in all the agencies and we put them in a network of coordinated, purposeful, and strategic action. Mr. Speaker, Plan Jamaica is a whole of government plan which focuses effort on 10 strategic areas. There is violence and crime, one discrete area. Then there is public order. Then there is corruption. Then there is community safety. And as I had mentioned before, territorial integrity. Then there are some things that we don't normally pay attention to. Crisis response and resilience. That is a part of securing Jamaica. Then there is justice. Then there is cyber defense. More and more Jamaicans are becoming aware. No, well, I mean, I think, the new trend in national security thinking is that the next frontier of conflict will be cyber. That is the Internet of Things, computers. And already we are starting to see elements of it being played out. The question is, where is Jamaica in all of this? And is our ability to control our cyberspace having an impact on crime locally? And you only need to look as far as lottery scamming to see that effect. So when we talk about a crime plan, it can't just be focused on, going in and pulling in some criminals. It's a very broad subject. And so the plan is, how do we secure Jamaica? And when we talk about security, we don't look at protecting our critical infrastructure, our ports, our airport, our cruise shipping terminals. Mr. Speaker, and then we have to look at our economic security. We have to think about protecting our tourism industry. We have to think about protecting our banking sector, because much of the crimes that are being committed, the criminals are looking for weak financial centers for them to put their illegal gotten gains. And Jamaica has to strengthen that. Now, that is not necessarily a national security effort. National security is there. The Bank of Jamaica is there. The Financial Investigation Division is there. So you have to coordinate a multiplicity of agencies in one plan. Plan Secure Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to go through all of what is there. We will publish this. I know you wouldn't want to hear it. I know you don't want to hear it. But we are going to publish, I'm going to publish this document because it makes a very interesting read. I'm just skipping through my pages quickly. Of course. Oh, it takes a little time. But, Mr. Speaker, the government recognizes the need for a comprehensive architecture for the broader security of the Jamaican state in a world of rapidly evolving threats and challenges to traditional and conventional national security structures. This requires a particular skill set and expertise to develop and give effect to the plan. The Prime Minister has therefore, I have appointed a national security advisor who works along with the Minister of National Security and my office. Former Chief of Staff of the Jamaica Defense Force, General Anderson. Mr. Speaker, his job is to support both my office because of the whole of government reach, and to support the Minister of National Security in pulling together all the various elements. And we have taken a very unusual step. Some of the commitments that we have made in crime fighting, we have actually placed them in the IMF program. So there is a public accountability framework for what we have to do. And Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that we are meeting the targets. Mr. Speaker, as I said, one element of Plan Secure Jamaica is to deal with corruption. Mr. Speaker, the area of corruption is one in which we have to give significant focus. As I said before, I'm not pleased that we have fallen in the corruption perception index. That is not good for Jamaica. So, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that today we will be, or have tabled, I've looked at my, we have tabled the MOCA bill. And let me make the point. MOCA started when the member from Central Manchester was the Minister of National Security. As I said, we saw the thing there, and we are building on that foundation. Part of the plan. What we did was to put the management in place to get that bill to Parliament quickly. Because that's our contribution in the relay of making Jamaica secure. So we shouldn't divide on this. So we are tabling the bill today, and we are hoping that we can pass it expeditiously. All of our international partners have been asking me, when are you going to pass the MOCA bill? And it is now here. I'm not minded to have it sent to a select committee, because I believe that the issues are quite clear and that we can debate it right away and have it passed. It is in the country's interest to do that. Mr. Speaker, MOCA has been operating as an elite investigative force, law enforcement, against major organized crime and anti-corruption. And they have been doing a very good job. This move will make MOCA independent of the police, because they have been operating under the powers of the JCF. Now, we have now effectively created a new law enforcement body with its own statutes. They will have powers of police within the ambit of their statute. And so, Mr. Speaker, there is now a real elite, integrous agency that will be investigating. Yes, it's an adjective for integrity.
Bobby, you should know that.
So, Mr. Speaker, this is the second bill that this administration is tabling to improve the anti-corruption framework. We have started the debate on the bill to create a single anti-corruption authority. I'm hoping that we can pass this bill very soon. Yes, we have passed it here, but the Parliament hasn't passed the bill. I'm hoping that we can pass this bill very soon. And I want to just make a few points. The Integrity Commission Bill is aimed at promoting and enhancing standards of ethical conduct for parliamentarians, public officials, and other persons serving in public capacity by consolidating laws relating to the prevention of corruption, the award and monitoring and investigating of government contracts, and prescribed licenses. So there is now a body that has the powers to investigate. This body and the public officials that surround this body or any other person that is providing a service to the public. So this body, having passed the legislation, mustn't wait on the body to impose integrity on us. We in this body must individually conduct ourselves with the highest integrity. Mr. Speaker, sometimes we miss the link between corruption and crime. The corruption that allows illegal guns and ammunition to come through our ports must be stopped. How is that corruption happening? Obviously, a public official must know about it. Not all of it is just slipping through unawares. We have to stop that, Mr. Speaker. Corruption that allows stolen vehicles to be registered and resold, we must stop that. Sometimes, can you imagine? Sometimes it happens. Corruption. We tend to think of corruption as the big things, but there are the small things as well that drive corruption, and there's a link between corruption and crime, corruption and lack of economic growth. Mr. Speaker, the corruption that furtively slows up and even denies the grant of a permit in order to secure payment, that corruption must be stopped. So, Mr. Speaker, MOCA is designed to tackle this kind of corruption. So when we talk about a plan to secure Jamaica, see, we have just put in place two very powerful pieces of legislation that will have an impact on crime. Powerful pieces of legislation, and this Parliament has to pass them very quickly to get the institutions up and running so that the corruption that is driving crime and slowing down economic growth and making people feel that their tax dollars are not being properly spent, that we can put an end to that. So I need the support of this House. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to a measure within Plan Secure Jamaica. As I told you, there are 10 areas. I looked at corruption, which is one of the 10, and what we are doing in that area. MOCA and the Anti-Corruption Commission. Well, this House has passed it, but the Senate hasn't passed it. So hopefully we'll get them out. We're working on those. And I'll probably try to have them here if it comes back from the Senate to have the regulations. So, Mr. Speaker, I now turn to a measure which addresses the area of community safety, public order, and violence. Not all of them. It's too much. But I'm just focusing. Mr. Speaker, the general levels of crime and violence presents an existential threat to the security of the nation, the rule of law and public order in the state, the safety and well-being of the public, the productivity and prosperity of the economy, and ultimately the life, liberty, and independence of the individual. Further analysis, particularly of murders, reveals a pattern of geographic concentration, and within those areas of clearly defined epicenters or hotspots. There are certain communities, Mr. Speaker, where the levels of crime and violence is elevated beyond normal law enforcement. These areas are of elevated criminal activities do not represent the majority of communities in Jamaica. Indeed, the majority of communities are peaceful and law-abiding. Mr. Speaker, areas of elevated levels of crime and violence map closely with high unemployment, low incomes, poor infrastructure, unplanned settlements, and generally a lack of access to state amenities and services. Criminals operate freely in these communities, taking life, taking property, taking your daughters, and extorting tax to protect you from them. The history of intervention by the state shows that an over-reliance on strong measures may attenuate the situation in the short term, but does not bring long-term stability and normalization. Any strategy to address these areas must be comprehensive, sustained, inclusive, and respectful of human rights and dignity of the people. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have considered the situation carefully, and I now table in this Parliament a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Special Measures for Upholding and Preserving the Rule of Law, Public Order, Citizen Security, and Public Safety within certain geographically defined areas of Jamaica and for connected matters, or concisely, the Zones of Special Operations, Special Security, and Community Development Measures Act 2017. The bill seeks to establish the framework in which the Prime Minister, acting on the advice of the National Security Council, may declare any high crime area of Jamaica a zone for special security operations and community development measures. Mr. Speaker, this legislation is designed to give effect to a well-established and practiced security and community building strategy called Clear, Hold, and Build. I want to say this again because I got something which emanated from the time when you, the member from Central Manchester, the spokesman on national security, when you were Minister of National Security, this policy of dealing with high crime areas, areas that are captured by gangs, was developed. Clear, hold, build. And we took it. Yeah, but you know it. Exactly. So what we have done, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the work has been done. The people have written it. We have gotten consultants all over. It's not rocket science. What we have to do now is implement. That's all we have to do. Don't spend any more money on studies and consultants. We have the things here right here. So, Mr. Speaker, this is not something that I went to bed and dreamt of. This is something that has been studied, written about. The criminologists, the sociologists, all of them have gathered around that a strategy to deal with this is the clear hold bill. And if you read the bill, that's what it is about. So, Mr. Speaker, let me run through it. No, but anyway, Mr. Speaker, I won't go through all but you know, the clearing strategy is that law enforcement will go in, they will need some special powers to ensure that they can saturate the area, that they can establish presence, that they can take back control. It's not about the guns. Well, you need the implementation of the strategy will require. Then, Mr. Speaker, the whole strategy. Once you have established the security control, you have to hold it, and right on the heels of that, you have to bring in all the social agencies. We have tried it, but we have never sustained it. And the security forces will tell you that where they have tried it, they have had results, but we have just not sustained it. And I'm certain that the former Minister of National Security cannot deny that that is the result. That where they have tried the clear hold bill strategy, they have had results. But the failure is not on the part of the security forces. The failure has been on the part of the state to come up with the resources to support it. And so what we are trying to do now, Mr. Speaker, is to create the legislative framework in which the clear hold bill strategy can work. Mr. Speaker, in just moving along very quickly. The legislation, I agree with the member from Central Manchester, and the concerns I'm interpreting on the face from the member from Central Kingston is breaking new ground in law enforcement strategy in Jamaica. While the measures it contemplates are urgent and very needed, it is equally important that they get bipartisan support and benefit from the close scrutiny of the Parliament in a joint select committee. I believe that in this bill we have struck the right balance of resolute policing with respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. I urge its quick passage so that we may save innocent Jamaicans from being deprived of their right to life and the enabling freedoms to enjoy it. Mr. Speaker, in my presentation last year, I introduced the National Identification Project as a priority. Again, I don't claim paternity. I am the midwife or the mid-husband. Right, I'm just the doctor delivering. This has been on our agenda from the 90s.
Shut up, Bobby.
So, Mr. Speaker, I'm now pleased to lay on the table of the House a bill to establish a body to be called the National Identification and Registration Authority for the promotion, establishment, and regulation of a national identification system for the registration, verification, and authentication of the identity of citizens and individuals ordinarily resident in Jamaica, to provide for the keeping, maintenance, and operation of a data bank to be called the National Civil and Identification Database, to provide for a national identification card and for connected matters, or concisely, the National Identification and Registration Act 2017. The bill is consistent with a rights-based approach to ensure that every citizen of Jamaica can be identified and be known to the state. Yes. Minister Henry, the member from Central Clarendon, there is scarcely a conversation in which he does not say to you, the population count is wrong. And more, Mr. Speaker, I I'm inclined to agree with him. But, Mr. Speaker, we introduced the National Students Registry. The former Minister of Education continued it. And recently I asked for a report on it, and I gather it is doing quite well and providing the ministry with critical information for their forward planning. I believe this bill is consistent with the Constitution in that it provides for the identification of citizens such that the state would be able to provide for their freedoms and security. So, Mr. Speaker, this is another bill which I would entreat to this House and ask for its speedy approval. Mr. Speaker, Ecclesiastes 9, verse 4 says, well, it's a part of a verse. Anyone who is among the living has hope. I find it profound. Because we have turned it into the colloquial saying, once there is life, there is hope. And so this is the fundamental reason why we must preserve life. It don't matter what your condition is life is. Once you are alive, you have hope. Well, I'll see you there. But hopefully you get there before me. I focused the greater part of my presentation on preserving the right to life, because once there is life, there is hope. It doesn't matter how dire your circumstances, there is hope. Hope for redemption, hope for prosperity. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord in the book of Jeremiah. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future. There is hope in life because we can use our labor. And that's the only thing we are born with. Many of us, we don't inherit any asset. We don't have any business. We don't have any land. The only thing that we have is our God-given labor. So once you are able to work, you are able to create value. And if you can create value, then you can start to create wealth. And it is by the creation of wealth that you start to have prosperity. So by the grace of God and our work, there is hope for our prosperity. It is the ethic of diligent work which informs our social intervention program. We believe that every Jamaican should be involved in meaningful work. There should be no idle hands in Jamaica. The government, as far as possible, should facilitate programs of meaningful work that advance the national interest and uplift and reward the worker. Mr. Speaker, today we officially launch the HOPE program.
Keep quiet and listen to good argument. Listen to good argument. Listen to good argument.
Housing, opportunity, production, and employment. Let me start with the employment aspect of HOPE. It is estimated that there is a pool of approximately 120 to 130,000 young persons between the ages 15 and 24 years who are not in school. Not in school. Well, they should be attached They are not in any program of training, and they are unemployed. While a considerable portion of unattached would have other institutions which keep them engaged and supported, such as family, church, and community, and some of them are in sports, a significant proportion of them have no structure or guidance in their life. Many of them would not be in institutions long enough to develop character and good citizenship, positive attitudes and skills to assist them in negotiating the challenges of life. We see them on the street corners every day when we are going to work, and we see them at the same place when we are coming home from work. They are at home every day, becoming increasingly hopeless and frustrated. Some get lured into crime and other dangerous activities, while others get pregnant or get into relationships of convenience. The longer our young people stay in the pool of unattached, the worse their prospect in life becomes. These are the most productive years in the human life cycle, and we cannot afford to lose the productive value of our human resources. It is also the age group that is most affected by crime and violence. Mr. Speaker, generally young people who stay in school or some form of training, even up to age 18, have a better chance of leaving the pool of unattached youth than those who dropped out at 15 or left school at 16. Therefore, this administration maintains a policy of compulsory education up to 18 years of age, adding 2 extra years to secondary schooling. This is the reason for which the Career Advancement Program was created, as a pathway to reintegrate young persons who dropped out of school early or could not matriculate to further studies. The Ministry of Education is now focusing on making educational access up to age 18 universal. At this stage, Mr. Speaker, the implementation of this strategy will see a reduction in the pool of unattached and in deviance in the unattached pool. What we are looking at, depending on how effective universal education up to age 18 is, how effectively it is implemented with the career advancement and sixth form and other programs, then you would start to cut off the flow of persons entering the unattached pool. So that pool will narrow. But, Mr. Speaker, the Human Employment and Resource Training Agency, the Heart Trust, which was conceptualized by former Prime Minister Edward Seaga, plays a key role in serving the age cohort 16 to 24. Presently, Heart offers training support to persons in the unattached pool who do not meet their general matriculation requirements or otherwise cannot gain entry to their formal suite of programs. And, Mr. Speaker, the former Minister of Education, in addition to what I introduced, introduced another program that was targeted to, I believe, ages 24 to 31, unattached youth. So there are, like in the Ministry of National Security, there are programs sprinkled all around. The National Youth Service, the NYS, and the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning also offers support to the unattached cohort. However, the services would be more effective, have greater reach, and enroll more numbers if they were streamlined and coordinated. The government has therefore decided to merge the Heart Trust NTA, the NYS, JFLL, and the Apprenticeship Board into a single entity. This merged institution will be dedicated to creating a universal system of institutional attachment involving skills training through apprenticeship, work programs, personal development and responsibility, and citizenship and volunteerism for Jamaican youths between the ages of 19 to 24. The principle behind the policy is that every unattached youth in Jamaica will have the opportunity to work while learning, earn while working, give back to the society through their work, and save from the earnings of their work. Learning, earning, giving, saving. The new Heart NTA will be required to develop a comprehensive system of national service corps in which every Jamaican youth in the targeted age cohort who is not otherwise enrolled in an approved educational institution or employed can find useful work under a program of apprenticeship while gaining the opportunity to be trained in a marketable skill, earning a reasonable stipend, and participating in a savings program where possible. The National Service Corps will be aligned to strategic national objectives. For example, in my last budget presentation, I indicated the need to start the process of digitizing records and paper-based documents in the various agencies across the public sector as part of our public transformation thrust through e-government. One of the first National Service Corps will be the Document Management and Digitization Corps. Already, we have identified over 3,000 work opportunities for this service corps. 3,000. The NHT is undertaking a major project to digitize their documents. And, Mr. Speaker, we will deploy persons who get into that service corps to do this work. And of course, this is already in the NHT's budget. The NLA is seeking to digitize the titling process. The RGD, as they transform to become the National Identification and Registration Authority, will need to digitize their records. The Ministry of Health, the Tax Authority of Jamaica, the Ministry of Education, up to this point have all indicated that they are undertaking a digitization program. And so what we will do with this program, what we will do is to almost finished. What we will do with this now, Mr. Speaker, answered. Mr. Speaker, Heart NTA will do the recruiting, training and placement. The other service corps which we have scoped and approved so far, we will have an environmental management corps. Mr. Speaker, this will be aimed at preserving critical environmental assets, and they will be engaged in planting trees to preserve our forests. They will be helping to collect data, and we have identified 800 work opportunities in this area. Mr. Speaker, a very interesting core which will become an important skill is the Geographic Information Systems Core. Initially, Mr. Speaker, we are projecting that there will be 1,000 persons working in this core. And I give you a simple project. The NWC will be creating a digital map of their water network, their piping system. They will be employing, I see that the chairman and the managing director sort of changed the number, but I'm putting the number back to where it was. The president, 300. They will need 300 young persons to go around the island and they will be using their cell phones to digitally map. So they will geolocate where they identify meters, where they identify leaks. And so on one computer screen, they can, after they have populated it, they can see the entire network of Jamaica. No, by the way, and I'm glad you raised it, this is a national project. This is not a political project. It's a national project. This is a... In fact, there will be an infrastructure and construction corps. And that corps, Mr. Speaker, we're looking to have approximately 6,000 persons in that corps. No. In fact, I must say, Mr. Speaker, well, another very important corps is a registration, verification, and audit corps. Once we start, Mr. Speaker, to do the national identification, we will invariably have to have people going out all over Jamaica to help people to get registered. And we will have our youngsters trained in this corps. Mr. Speaker, there are 7 corps, and we will at the appropriate time publish more details. But there's one National Service Corps which I want to point out. It is called the National Service Enlistment Program. Mr. Speaker, today I'm tabling in the House an amendment to the Defence Act to establish an arm of the Jamaica Defence Force to be known as the National Service Corps. And to provide for the enlistment and terms of service for enlistment in the Jamaica National Service Corps under the Jamaica Defence Force. I'm proud to announce that the Jamaica Defence Force is playing its part. It recently launched its National Service Enlistment Program. It will see 1,000 young Jamaicans from the targeted age group 18 to 23, which is most of that unattached group, being enlisted in the JDF annually. Normally the enlistment under the JDF would be between 200 to 300. We have expanded that. And what will happen is that they will register and train for 1 year. From the pool that is trained, the best will be selected to join the army. But they could always decide to go and join the police because they would have effectively met the training requirements. They would automatically qualify to become security guards. They would automatically qualify to go into, for example, the fire service. So effectively what we are doing is to use the capacity of the Jamaica Defence Force to bring in our young men especially and give them the kind of disciplined, regimented training that they need at that stage to ensure that they become functional citizens. We have given them the budget for it. They have given the budget. From the central budget. Now, Mr. Speaker, again, this is not a new idea. I'm certain that, the member from South St. Andrew would know that in the 1970s, I believe that former Prime Minister Michael Manley had announced a similar program, which was the precursor, the forerunner to the National Youth Service. Mr. Speaker, I think the time is ripe for that. I think we need to have, my view, and I'm not saying that this is what we are putting in place, but I think eventually, for us to have a true control over crime and violence, we will have to have a national service for our young people that is mandated if you are not in school and you are not working. But we're not there yet because that requires a massive budget. How we have done it is that, again, employed management practices. We have looked at the budget, we have seen where the areas of needs are, we have seen where the funding can be, and we have used the existing budget to create the space to do this. So it will not have a massive impact on the budget. The total number that we are looking for, that we have found space for, like the programs which the ministries have said, yes, we have the budget, yes, we have the programs for them. Total number is 15,000, and that will start this year. 15,000. We have not yet gone to the private sector. And I'm very cautious because the former Prime Minister, now leader of the opposition, had announced a program with working in tandem with, so I think I have to give this program a little bit more thought as to how we could incorporate the private sector. The private sector does have similar programs, and we will be working with the private sector to see how the synergies can be exploited. My view is that by the end of this year, we should be able to have at least 25,000 youngsters in work opportunities. And these are not 2 weeks, 3 weeks programs. Minimum, you're looking at a 6 month to a year deployment. I mean, when you start to consider, this fiscal year, yeah. When you start to consider a program of digitizing titles, for example, you can't do that within 6 weeks. It's a long engagement. So I think, Mr. Speaker, this is a good program. It is good for Jamaica, and I will make sure, Mr. Speaker, that the program is not run on a political basis. Jamaica has to use all its advantages. Jamaica has to use all its advantages to pursue its sustainable economic growth and development. If we are interested in sustainable economic growth, diversification of our economy has to be an urgent priority. A major strategy for diversification on which the government will be focused is the pursuit of the logistics hub. I don't want to use that word. It's just that it has been so maligned. But we will be pursuing logistics, a sector in which Jamaica has a natural advantage due to our geographic location, as I have said, and increased trade through the Panama Canal to the east coast of the U.S. Continued increasing trade between North and South America. These trends are likely to increase the demand for transshipment services in the form of hub and spoke transshipment. They come here, they take, unload, assemble, and break the bulk, send it to smaller places in smaller amounts, or relay transshipment. They come here, offload, go to another ship, and off. Our unique location presents opportunities for the location of group logistics headquarters and major distribution centers from key transnational corporations. The location of assembly and light manufacturing for transnational companies and their suppliers transporting goods along the major trade corridors within the Western Hemisphere. The provision of logistics services to facilitate efficient processing or increased volumes, and the development of centers of excellence in logistics expertise. Initially, Mr. Speaker, the government's objective will be to attract increased transshipment cargo to the Kingston Harbour and to develop warehousing and logistics facilities at locations immediately adjacent to the main transshipment terminals and at key zones linked to the terminals by appropriate transportation infrastructure. Long-term goal, Mr. Speaker, is to attract strategic investors to establish their logistics, their light manufacturing, and commercial operations in Jamaica, in our logistics zones. Mr. Speaker, the government is also interested in attracting innovative, technology-driven organizations to use our zones as a base from which to launch their products and services into international markets. Mr. Speaker, I want to brief the Parliament on current developments towards establishing Kingston as a premier transshipment hub. Mr. Speaker, in July 2016, the government of Jamaica entered into a 30-year concession agreement with the terminal operating arm of CMA-CGM, the world's third largest shipping line, for the operation of the country's main transshipment terminal. Under the concession agreement, CMA-CGM is responsible for dredging the Kingston Harbour's access channel and basin, and to the upgrade and expansion of the capacity of the terminal to 3.2 trillion TEUs, that is 20-foot container equivalent units. And this is to be done within the first 5 years, with further expansion and upgrades thereafter. Currently, the dredging operations are in progress and will be completed this year. Mr. Speaker, by implementing the Asikuda system, the Port Authority of Jamaica and the Customs Agency are collaborating to create an integrated electronic platform on which to execute all transactions between members of the port community in a paperless and efficient manner. Completion is expected this year. All of this creates a high degree of confidence that Kingston will resume its position as the leading transshipment terminal in the region in 2018. Mr. Speaker, beyond transshipment of cargo, the government intends to develop as a logistics hub with facilities for warehousing, consolidation, repackaging, and re-exporting of the cargo brought to the country in containers or in bulk form. The government intends to develop special economic zones where light manufacturing and assembly operations can be undertaken for the international market, create an environment that attracts international marquee or anchor investors, as well as other innovative knowledge-based firms to relocate their regional and international operations to Jamaica. Kingston is currently the home of a nascent logistics sector. Kingston Logistics Centre, a subsidiary of ZIM, is located adjacent to the Freeport Terminal Limited and operates a container freight station along with facilities for the repair of containers and the warehousing and transshipment of motor vehicles. Kingston Wharves Limited is in the process of developing over 160,000 feet of modern logistics warehouse facilities. It is also upgrading its capacity to serve as a base for the growing automobile warehousing and transshipment business. Mr. Speaker, to further develop logistics operations, the government has identified strategically located parcels of land for the construction of warehousing and to facilitate manufacturing, assembly, and other value-added activities. The first of these is comprised of blocks of lands immediately adjacent to the transshipment terminal and include a developed and owned property by the Port Authority, which is currently undeveloped. The Port Authority has also another 40-hectare block of reclaimed land immediately to the west of the Kingston Freeport Terminal. Additionally, 14 hectares of land immediately adjacent to the terminal, which are currently populated by old warehouses and operated as free zones. In addition, the government owns 40 hectares of land in the vicinity of Tinston Pen. The Cayman Special Economic Zone, a greenfield slated for development consisting of 570 hectares of land owned by the Urban Development Corporation. And then there is the Portland Bight Industrial Park, a block of 2,428 hectares of land that has been earmarked for development of an industrial estate comprised of commercial and light and medium manufacturing operations. These lands are initially the subject of a framework agreement between the Port Authority of Jamaica and, Mr. Speaker, these lands will be used to expand our logistics operation. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, the government enacted the Special Economic Zone law and regulations as a critical component of the Logistics Hub initiative. This will provide the legislative framework to attract manufacturing companies and technology firms to engage in value-added activities on goods transshipped through Jamaica. A free zone council has been established to oversee the enactment of the new regulations. In conjunction with the SEZ legislation, the Customs Act is being revised with a view to render it more supportive of the development of logistics operations linked to the transshipment of goods through the island and seaport.
You did everything, Tony.
Mr. Speaker, I went through all of that and just trying to rush through it because there's a lot of things being done. But the critical point to note, Mr. Speaker, is that the government of Jamaica is now declaring the development of the logistics sector as a national project, a project of national strategic importance. We will appoint an enterprise team to be led by the Honourable Michael Lee Chin, who is also chairman of the Economic Growth Council. The enterprise team will consist of public sector leaders and, after relevant consultations with industry, investors, and other public officials. The team will be responsible for assessing customs reform, shipping regulation reform, logistics activity zones, logistics investment promotion. The enterprise team will also look to integrate the efforts of all the relevant project units, statutory agencies, ministries, and public bodies into a coherent, unified project team capable of advancing the objectives more quickly and equipped to interface more effectively with the international market and local investors. Mr. Speaker, under this administration, the goal of making Jamaica a logistics center, a logistics hub, a logistic economy will be realized. And again, Mr. Speaker, this is not something that we create. We saw what was there, we saw the gaps, we saw where we needed to tighten up some things, we looked at other opportunities, and we are putting together now a strategic management of the operation. We're going to put it in the hands of someone who understands global business and who can make it happen. And the government will support the enterprise team that is created to ensure that logistics become a reality. As I said, the government of Jamaica has to build new industries. We have to create new industries as part of the diversification strategy, and logistics is one of them. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to global outsourcing services. We call it BPOs. Mr. Speaker, the outsourcing industry is a result of a business model in which activities previously done domestically in a developed country are transferred to companies overseas. The global growth in this type of activity is driven by the pressure on companies competing internationally to rationalize costs, improve operational performance, and simultaneously add greater value to the goods and services offered to their customers. At the outset, the focus of the activity was on cost reduction only. Over time, however, businesses have come to view outsourcing as a strategy to increase efficiency, reduce business risks, lower production development cycle, and boost innovation within their business. Whereas the average annual growth in the global economy in the past decade was 2.8%, the annual growth in the outsourcing industry was 4.1%. The global market for outsourcing services is projected to reach US $220 billion by 2020. For the benefit of members, Mr. Speaker, it is useful to outline the contours of the industry. The activities involved in the global outsourcing service industry can be grouped into 3 segments according to the characteristics of the tasks or processes that are internationally commercialized. The first segment to have been established and the largest relative in terms of information technology outsourcing segment, where activities are focused on providing information technology support in 2 main areas: infrastructure and data processing, and B, software applications. This segment requires a labor force skill in software programming and computing. Currently, the market for ITO services globally stands at $76 billion. The second segment is the business process outsourcing segment, which is linked to the outsourcing of administrative services and back office tasks. Here, interpersonal skills, communication skills, and decision-making capacity are very important. The global market for BPO services now stands at US $38 billion. The third segment is the knowledge process outsourcing segment, which involves knowledge-based services, including research and development, innovation, design, testing, building consultancies, legal services, accounting, medical and biotechnological services, among others. Mr. Speaker, this requires high skills. Jamaica's competitive advantages, Mr. Speaker, with respect to BPO investments include a proven track record in foreign investment, a large, educated, and English-speaking workforce, competitive priced infrastructure, low employee turnover rates, and high productivity, and its nearshore advantages to the North American market. Within the sector, Jamaica's talent pool currently supports the provision of services in a variety of fields, including voice-driven services, healthcare, finance and accounting, software development, testing and maintenance, and legal services. There are 2 critical factors which are important to Jamaica's sustained growth in outsourcing. The first is the availability of purpose-built facilities in which to undertake the advanced activities associated with business process and knowledge process outsourcing. The second is the adequacy of the labor pool. Availability of purpose-built facilities. In February 2016, Mr. Speaker, the building space available to the sector was 800,000 square feet, located in Montego Bay and Kingston primarily, with some emerging developments in Mandeville. This space was occupied by 44 companies that employed 18,500 employees. In the last year, the available space has grown by 65% to 1.3 million square feet. The number of firms have grown to 50, and I want you to pay attention to this. The employment has expanded to 22,000 employees, a creation of just under 5,000 jobs. In addition to the 6 new entrants employing 600 employees, the existing companies have expanded employment by over 4,000. These companies include Induja, Global Services, ITEP BPO Smart Services, IBEX Jamaica, Advanced Call Center Technologies, Xerox Conducent, and Nearshore Inbound Call Experts, and of course, Sutherland Global. Currently, work is underway in the public sector, principally by the Port Authority and the Factories Corporation, to construct over 250,000 square feet of new purpose-built space and to retrofit an additional 50,000 square feet of existing buildings for outsourcing services. In addition, there is approximately 800,000 square feet of space under construction by private sector operations across the country, with Stanley Motor constructing over 250,000 square feet of new and retrofitted space in Halfway Tree. Grace Kennedy retrofitting over 60,000 square feet in downtown Kingston at the CSO. Ferry BPO constructing 50,000 square feet in St. Catherine. In St. James, Barnett Tech Park is adding 100,000 square feet in new facilities. Bioprist is adding 150,000 square feet, and Bioprist is scheduled to add another 150,000 square feet in Hanover. Global Centralized Access is adding 20,000 square feet in Clarendon. The important feature is the role now being assumed by the private sector in improving purpose-built facilities for outsourcing services and the geographic spread of the facilities across the country. Within a year from today, the space available in BPOs will have almost increased from 800,000 square feet in February 2016 to 2.4 million in 1 year's time. An increase of over 200%. But the important point, Mr. Speaker, is that we expect that all of this investment will create conservatively 20,000 additional jobs from today, or a total of just under 25,000 jobs created since February 2016. Mr. Speaker, we made a commitment to economic growth and job creation, and we are fulfilling that commitment. Last year, it was indicated that 10,000 solutions, not including home improvement and build and own lands loans, were to be started over a 3-year period, ending March 2019. For the first year, that is 2016 to 2017, the NHT is on schedule, having started approximately 3,060 solutions. For the 2017-2018 financial year coming, the NHT will construct 5,737 housing solutions and complete 1,682 solutions in St. Andrew, St. Catherine, Clarendon, Manchester, St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Hanover, and St. James, right across the island. With total housing expenditure budgeted at $28.6 billion. It is estimated that these projects will generate employment for 3,800 Jamaicans. By March 2020, approximately 15,000 solutions would have started, with the NHT pursuing further public-private partnerships. The expectation is that this number will significantly increase. Mr. Speaker, I have given the NHT one mandate: build house. And they will build more houses than they have ever built in their 48 history going forward. Last year, we reduced the period of eligibility for home grants from 10 years to 7 years and increased the amount for the grant from 1.2 million to 1.5 million, an increase of 24%. Now beneficiaries can receive up to $4 million by combining their mortgage loan and the home grant amount. Now they would be able, Mr. Speaker, to access up to 1.5 million, which represents a 25% increase. It was announced also, Mr. Speaker, that the NHT will develop approximately 2,000 service lots, which will be delivered over the next 2 years. We are paying special attention to housing for the tourism sector. Mr. Speaker, I want to identify some NHT projects which will be specifically targeted to the tourism industry. Industry Cove, Friendship Meadows, Windsor, Dry Valley, Mansard in St. Anne, and Galena in St. Mary. Housing near tourism. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that there are some challenges with self-employed individuals and some private entities in keeping up with their mortgage payments. So we have designed a program which was launched in January 2017 called the Contribution Arrears Program, to allow persons to normalize their contribution status with the trust. This will address contributions which have been outstanding up to 2016. The usual penalties and interest will be waived. Contributors will also have up to 5 years to regularize their contribution arrears. I want to encourage those persons who have arrears with the NHT to take advantage of this program. Mr. Speaker, the NHT has intensified its effort to reach low-income contributors for whom home ownership has been elusive. I am pleased to announce the Housing Microfinance Initiative, which begins April 1, 2017, and which is targeted to this vulnerable segment of the population. The Housing Microfinance Initiative provides unsecured credit to meet the demand for low-income households. It will allow for people to repair and improve their existing homes or build their own homes one step at a time. The NHT will provide funds to other institutions for unlending to current and new contributors to meet specific needs such as titling, infrastructure upgrading, utilities installation, construction preliminaries, valuation reports, housing design, and for completion of different stages of building. A maximum of $850,000 per borrower will be provided with a loan tenure of between 6 months to 5 years. While this facility is intended for contributors, non-contributors may also apply. However, they must become contributors before disbursements are made. We will offer low interest rates that can be accessed through other microfinance institutions. This program will also commence on April the 1st, 2017. This, Mr. Speaker, is a financial program to promote housing. You like that one? because no, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it. Right, but I said exactly. For 2017, 2018 financial, for the 2017-2018 financial year, the NHD plans to write over 8,000 new loans at a value of $17.8 billion. With the 2 policy changes already made, the NHD expects greater take-up for from low-income earners. Of note, it is significant, Mr. Speaker, that we are going to be delivering solutions which will be aligned to the affordability levels of persons earning minimum wage. So, Mr. Speaker, when what you have to look at is the value of the mortgage, right? So what we are going to try and do is to create more products that can meet the low-income earners' income stream. That would also mean looking at the cost of the houses that are being delivered, and that the NHD is already looking at in terms of the technology used, the construction used, to bring houses that can meet low-income earners. The NHD will implement policies effective July 1 this year to ensure that any individual contributing for 7 years or more who meets the NHD eligibility requirement is able to access funding to allow him or her to purchase at minimum a studio unit. That's a very important policy. So our policy is that, and I want to just repeat it, that the NHD will implement policies effective the 1st of July this year to ensure that any individual contributing for 7 years or more who meets the NHD eligibility requirements is able to access funding to allow him or her to purchase at minimum a studio unit. A special incentive will also be made. A special incentive will also be made to eligible contributors who wish to purchase scheme units. Subject to affordability, the NHD will offer 100% financing for all the housing solutions it produces. So now you will be able to, the NHD will offer 100% financing to any unit that it builds. This policy will come into effect July 1. Currently, the NHD's home improvement loan is at $1.5 million for each contributor. Effective July 1, 2017, there will be a significant increase to this, Mr. Speaker. Eligible contributors can access up to 2.5 million and jointly 5 million. And I have more good news, Mr. Speaker. Effective July 1, also, loans to purchase land, that is house lot loans, will be increased to 2.5 million from the previous limit of 2 million. It's not just goodies. We are serious about giving Jamaicans the opportunity to own their own homes. And you see, Mr. Speaker, when I made the statement that the NHT should be run as if it were a financial institution, I know it would have created all kinds of debate because the NHT is a sensitive issue. And I recall in the debate here when the previous government and the then minister brought the bill to legitimize the taking of money from the NHT. It was a very heated exchange. But in that debate, I had made it clear that the NHT had reached a point in its institutional life where it needs to have an institutional review. So many demands are being made on it. The boards come under a lot of pressure for approve all kinds of things. You know, the public is making demands on it. The politicians are making demands on it. And if we're not careful, you know, the NHT might end up not being either fish or fowl. So I've given a directive to the NHT board to do an institutional review. That institutional review is ongoing. And so I don't want to say too much of my own thoughts because, you know, I don't want the review to have to incorporate anything that I may say publicly. But a point that was already made, and I said this at the time when it happened, if the NHT had a board that was like a financial board with a high fiduciary responsibility, then incidents such as Outameni would not have happened. And so all who want to, you know, get into a knot about whether or not the NHT is a financial, yeah, come on. The NHT is one of the largest financial institutions in Jamaica. Yeah. The money that it has is technically a deposit. And so it has to be managed. The financial aspect of it has to be managed as if it were a bank or a building society. Now, that doesn't mean that its social obligations would be diminished. In fact, its social obligations to provide housing would be improved the better the financial performance of the organization. But like everything else, you know, in Jamaica, we want to just, you know, take everything and turn it upside down and make a political point. When there is no political point to be made, it is a fact. The institution manages billions of dollars and you can't play around with it. You have to ensure that the board is a strong board, almost like a board running a financial institution. And really, I think that is one of the reforms. And this, Mr. Speaker, is not a new statement. I have made this statement several times before. Of course, it has taken on new significance given the issue. But the point to be made about the NHT, I am not coming here and issuing out goodies without considering that the institution has to have a strong financial base, given all the pressures that are being brought on the institution. And one of the things that I think it's my obligation is that very good institution conceived by former Prime Minister Michael Manley. We don't want it to be destroyed. We want it to be a legacy. So we are awaiting the review, and I'm hoping that, well, we will bring the review here, and then we will decide as a parliament what needs to happen to strengthen the institution. So, Mr. Speaker, the NHD, Mr. Speaker, is also partnering with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation and with support from agencies such as the UDC and the National Water Commission, and they will undertake a program for the redevelopment of targeted areas of Kingston and St. Andrew. And this project, Mr. Speaker, is called the Urban Regeneration Program. The main objective of this program is to bring back desirability for living in areas that were previously considered high to middle income areas. The areas to be redeveloped are in close proximity to where people work, attend school, play, shop, and socialize. The program will utilize higher density housing and mixed-use designs. The approach will reduce the cost of construction while providing housing solutions of the highest planning, developmental, environmental, energy utilization, and safety standards. The areas identified for the pilot projects are Kingston Gardens, the former member isn't here, Eastwood Park Gardens, and Vineyard Town, not here. Activities will begin in Kingston Gardens, within the area identified for the planning of Government Circle, which is being led by the Urban Development Corporation. I want to pause here. Mr. Speaker, I want to just update the nation because I detect some concerns from certain quarters about the development of Government Circle. The government of Jamaica signed an MOU with China Construction America, which is a subsidiary of China State Construction and Engineering Corporation Company Limited, one of the world's largest investment and construction groups and a Fortune 500 company. And this company operates in North America and South America. The MOU provides for the UDC and CCA to collaborate in relation to the preliminary phase of the Government Circle project, which will include the creation of a development proposal, the sharing of knowledge, technical resources and information with a view to the development of the project itself, that is the build-out of the project. It is always intended to collaborate with local architects and urban planners to get their advice and input. Already, one local architect has sent me some designs that he had developed for the Parliament some time ago, and I believe, yes, and I believe it came here and we discussed it. This will be a national project, and certainly building things like our Parliament must have a significant local input and participation at every stage and at every level. The UDC is still in the preliminary scoping and planning phase. However, at the earliest feasible time, the UDC will establish a mechanism by which the local community of architects and engineers and urban planners can collaborate in the process. So I want it to be clear, it's a joint venture. We have not asked a Chinese company to develop the area by themselves. Strategically, to take on such a massive project would invariably deplete the resources of the UDC to carry out other projects in which it is engaged. And so what we want to do is get other partners involved to work jointly with us to share the resources so that we are able to do the developments in Ocho Rios, the developments we plan for Montego Bay, while still taking on this mega project. No, remember, this is just, no, we are not, this is just So this is just the design phase. So we're working with them. There is no agreement about going forward. Just participate with us in helping the design. The beauty of it is that you get to leverage the experience of such a large company. This company builds cities. And they have the technical experience and project management know-how that we can leverage. So it's a good MOU. The NHT, the UDC will ensure that there is local participation and collaboration. This will be a truly national project and a joint effort in developing the ministries around the circle, developing the Parliament building, and potentially to develop a national museum. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, of course, which is why we've brought it here. Mr. Speaker, no, but remember now, we are still at a preliminary stage. I have to have something like a model to bring to say this is what it looks like. So we're not at that stage as yet. We're still scoping. Mr. Speaker, for far too long as a society, we have failed to focus significantly and meaningfully on improving benefits to persons with disabilities. As a start, effective July 1, the NHT will improve its benefits to persons with disability. We will provide a grant to NHT mortgagors with disabilities who reside with and care for a family member with disabilities. The grant is to be used to retrofit, upgrade the dwelling to make it suitable to serve the needs of the disabled. Mr. Speaker, in my last budget debate, I committed that I would give some attention to older housing schemes which are now approaching the time in their useful life cycle where there may be serious maintenance needs in shared infrastructure and common facilities. Many of the older NHT schemes, I have two in my constituency, and I grew up in one, and there are in Western St. Andrew, in Spanish. Well, I grew up in one in Spanish Town. So many of the older housing schemes were not designed with proper provisions for garbage disposal, common play areas, and amenities which are now standard features for the newer housing schemes. So I have mandated the NHT in its 40th year, and as a project to mark Jamaica 55, to look at those schemes built in the first 10 years of the NHT, assess their needs, and see to their upgrading. Two? Yeah. I'm happy to announce, Mr. Speaker, that over a 2-year period, the NHT will spend $4 billion on upgrading work to the selected housing schemes right across Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, as Prime Minister, I must lead the way. I am optimistic about Jamaica's future. I have to be an Isaiah who, despite seeing the problems faced by his people, look beyond those problems to a brighter day when they would overcome those problems. As Buju Banton says, it's not an easy road. But I say, as Tony Rebel said, if Jah is standing by my side, then why should I be afraid? As we celebrate Jamaica 55 with our athletes set to shine in London at the World Championship, I remind us that we are a nation of champions. Let us, in our 55th year, recommit to making our independence really meaningful and aim for our economic independence. We make our independence meaningful when we come to grips with our realities and make the connections between what we do and the realities we face. Independence means ultimately taking responsibility. Mr. Speaker, we make our independence meaningful by normalizing economic growth and prosperity, reversing decades-old complacency and stagnation. Mr. Speaker, this government has made the word prosperity a mantra. It is a good mantra, an overdue one. But more important than making it into a mantra is making it into a mindset and then making it into a way of life. Our first challenge, Mr. Speaker, is to change our thinking. We have to move from a poverty consciousness to a prosperity consciousness. We make our independence meaningful by providing jobs for our people and releasing their entrepreneurial energies. Employment, Mr. Speaker, is independence in your hands. And this government is dutifully, steadily creating more jobs for the people of this country. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. In work there is hope. In work there is dignity. In work there is learning. In work there is earning. We give back by working, and we can save from what we earn from working. Let us give our young people legs. Learning, earning, giving, saving. To run the race of life like Usain and Shelley and win and prosper. Mr. Speaker, we make our independence meaningful by respecting life and preserving the enabling freedoms and security to enjoy life. Ultimately, we are responsible for our life and the lives of our family and neighbors. Let us eschew violence in our daily lives. And I know that the leader of the opposition will love this one. The word is love. The word is love. We make our independence meaningful by making housing accessible and affordable to our people and giving them proper social amenities, thus concretizing our respect for them. We make our independence meaningful by restoring law and order in communities all across Jamaica and making every area a safe zone. Providing opportunities for our young people to work so that they can take responsibility for their children, respecting our women and honoring their dignity and not beat them and abuse them. Protecting our poor and vulnerable and accepting our obligations to them. Faithfully guarding the interests of persons with disability and accepting them as full and equal citizens and putting in place what is necessary for them to be functional in the society. Displaying tolerance, fairness, and non-partisanship. We make our independence meaningful by accepting personal responsibility and exiting the blame game. Independence means taking responsibility for yourself. I close with the words of Marcus Garvey, who said, "Created in the image of God, we have the same common rights. I trust that you will lift yourselves from the doubts of the past and will strike out in this new life. This new life embodied in the vision of a new Jamaica, one that is truly independent. We have changed the mindset. We believe that a truly prosperous Jamaica is possible. God bless this house. God bless our families. God bless Jamaica, land we love.
May I advise that the Parliament is still in session, and if you are leaving, you're leaving as quiet as possible. Do not participate. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure we all want to thank the Most Honourable Prime Minister for such a brilliant presentation. And I want to ask that the debate on the Appropriation Bill 2017 be suspended until tomorrow, when the Honourable Minister of Finance will close the debate.
All those in favour? Those opposed? The ayes have it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to ask for the recommittal of notice of motion given orally.
Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, he will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Law Reform Zone of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017.
Those in favour?
Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any more business for the day. I ask that the House be adjourned until 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
The motion is that the House be now adjourned until tomorrow at 2 p.m. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Yes, have it. May I advise that until the mace goes through the door, all visitors, all members, stand in silence. The House is now adjourned until tomorrow at 2 p.m.